almost in a way. And the meeting, oh, okay, I thought it just ended. Okay, so in so the first thing we had to do was, figure out what we were going to analyze, and then even before we just said how we're going to analyze it, what are the factors that we wanted to look at, and then to make sure that we all agreed on the criteria, being the language or the words that follow. So the first one, when we started to look at economic inequity, so that means that people, by inequity, we're saying what people earn and what's their likelihood of living within walking distance of a less dense open street with fewer cars on it. And so in looking at that, we did this heat map where the darker color indicates lower income, the lighter color indicates medium income, and then the brighter colors indicate higher income. And what you could see just barely, we maybe could have punched up the graphics a little bit, maybe made these streets red, but these dark lines indicate the open streets. And so being within walking distance is already a judgment call, saying that that walking distance means it's desirable, right? So we've already established kind of a hypothesis that walking is more desirable than driving. And of course, why would you drive to a street where you can walk on? You'd want to walk to that street. So we're setting up, again, hypotheses can be challenged or questioned. They might not turn out exactly the way you thought they would when you set them up. But this is just, so we just went through these maps. So I'll start to go a little bit more quickly now because each map starts to look the same. So the first one was, how much do people earn and how close do they live within that walking distance? You probably already read this over here, that if you earn more money, then chances are you're within walking distance of a very nice street. And the streets, again, aren't historical streets. I didn't actually mention that, so not again. The streets aren't historically nice streets. They're actually new streets that were, existing streets that were turned into open streets during the pandemic. So the cars the streets were turned into pedestrian only or pedestrian friendly streets during the pandemic. So this is a new initiative in the city over the past year. And what we were analyzing is, well, where did they choose to place those streets? And they consistently placed them in the yellow areas. So the next thing we were looking at was access to education. So people without a high school diploma, using the darker map, and then getting lighter towards more higher education. And the colors were intentional. A couple of reasons why we chose the color, not just to be ironic about the color of people's skin, but it was actually because the darker colors on the map just jump off the page. So it was a graphical choice as well. And then we start to identify with these bubbles what the patterns are telling us. The next pattern is health insurance. Who has health insurance? Now, you've already probably noticed that the dark colors on the map start to align. And then this next map is race and ethnicity. Now the colors represent something else. So yellow is Hispanic, pink or the darker pink colors, these are blacks, blue and light blue are whites. I think we also have this purple color. If you're not colorblind, you can start to see this purple, that's Asian. And those are we decided to limit it to the 4 largest ethnic groups, race and ethnicity groups in New York City. But because the map will get much more complex, and green still represents parks. So from there, we started to look at facts, just not even trying to do anything with the facts yet, just saying, well, what happens in these neighborhoods is, not even assuming that these things are bad or coincidences, but what else happens. And so these facts were important to share, giving you a chance to look at them. So then we decided, let's look at a particular neighborhood. Let's zoom in on one of these bubbles. And I think what we decided to zoom in on was that neighborhood. The reason why we chose that is because none of us knew anything about it. So we wanted to erase any presumptions. And that's where you get into this kind of continued zoom in. And we picked a neighborhood within a neighborhood within the neighborhood and said, okay, this could be now an example for a much larger scale intervention. And that's where it gets down to this, the intervention we decided was a very small streetscape change where we would take the cars off the streets and replace them with interventions that could start to try to solve some of these economic, information, or health inequities through design. And that design then would provide a flexible framework. Let's see if I can get to that. For in this case, it was a shipping container because that we felt was also perfect for an urban environment. So you're taking this shipping container and then folding it, unfolding it, and turning it into multiple objects. It could be a planter, it could be a restaurant, it could be a health club, it could be a healthcare facility, business incubator, and that was all driven by the needs of the community, not by the needs of the designer or the architect. It turns into a bookstore if you want it to, or a library. So you have internet access for people who don't have access to the internet. So this street then goes from that, which is activated but not particularly nice or friendly, to that, which we think is equally activated but in a much more friendly, accessible, and equitable way. And I think that's it. So I can stop there, open to questions, and or I could turn it over to some other Genslerite.
Okay, wait, we have questions.
Yes, please.
All right, so can we go back to some of the analysis maps? I think once we zeroed in on kind of Soundview, the Soundview neighborhood.
That's probably here.
Yeah, so, okay. I understand the analysis of kind of these different inequities in South Bronx and just the overall inequities in New York, and then South Bronx, and et cetera, and then narrowing it down to Soundview because you wanted to learn more about that particular area. At what point was the idea, I guess, to make this a pedestrian only street? When did that come about, or was that the initial goal to start with?
The initial goal was to look at the pedestrian only or pedestrian friendly streets and see how they performed.
Right.
And then while we were looking at the numbers, the statistics, they actually did have a positive economic impact on the neighborhoods where they were placed.
Okay.
While we were looking at that, we were just like, wait a second, where have they been placed? And it turns out they were consistently placed in neighborhoods. They were providing a positive economic impact to neighborhoods that already had a great economy.
Right.
And the couple of ones that were placed in the South Bronx had an equally positive impact. So we're like, well, why not more? If it's working, why not provide them to the neighborhoods that need them the most? So we kind of veered off. We started with just one idea, and it veered off towards where the kind of data led us.
Okay. And so my follow-up question to that is, can you talk a little bit more about how you came to the consensus of these kind of one box, multifunctional solutions to different inequities in that particular community?
That's really great. That's a great question. This was probably the challenge. We talked about bicycle lanes. We talked about, wow, let me see, there were at least 10 different ideas, and I can only remember bicycle lanes. If I think hard enough, I think we were talking about vacant storefronts. We were talking about a bunch of different ideas. I just can't remember all of them, but what we eventually started to think about was that putting something in the pedestrian right of way would have been a problem. The sidewalks in New York we're trying to counteract negative effects of density or congestion. Right. So we didn't want to put something in the right of way, and we didn't want to also try to say, like, we can put this in an existing space. If we wanted to take a retail space, we're taking, potentially a profit source away from somebody. So why would they buy in?
Right.
Right. So that's where we thought that this is a town-wide or city-wide, or community-wide or city-wide intervention. Then the city could just say, we're doing this, and it's part of the public domain.
Okay.
So that's where the box came in, a freestanding structure, and the flexibility of the box was, well, we didn't want to lock into one of the ideas. We wanted to make something that would be flexible enough that the community members could say, we decided we want a church. Oh, okay, then it's a church.
Right.
You know, it could be,
Understood.
whatever. Yeah.
So question number 3, and then I'm gonna shut up so the students could ask questions. I'm familiar with this area because my father actually lived in the South Bronx. And I spent some time living in Brooklyn as well. So I'm wondering, with the implementation of these pedestrian-friendly streets and parking being such an issue in some of these areas, what happens to the cars?
So that's where I know it's in here somewhere. I'm not sure if I can actually dig it up, but we're trying to choose. That was the one slide.
Well, the people are more important. I'm just wondering these.
Yeah. So what we're looking at, one response is here. This is a Dutch concept, I think. Yeah, it's definitely Dutch, called a Woonerf, basically traffic calming, which means that they're more pedestrian friendly, which is as opposed to pedestrian only. So pedestrian friendly streets, you can still drive on them, you can still park on them. We're just making it so that you're not drag racing down the street. So the person who wants to get down here into the median and ride their bicycle or jog isn't feeling like let's go run on, like I want to run on the highway. It's not,
Right.
This is much more kind of an open, friendlier idea than the previous image, wherever that went to. That guy, like you're not jogging there.
No, not at all.
Right. So the part of the analysis, I can't prove it, but what we were looking at was active storefronts and areas that weren't going to be so hard hit by parking changes.
Okay.
That was one of the considerations. We weren't able to 100% prove it in the time that we had, but active storefronts was an important part of that. If you have active ground floor uses, then you're going to need active parking directly in front of that.
Right. Okay. I'm going to be quiet now. Thank you so much, Doug. This was really cool. What it makes me think of is like, okay, I spent a greater part of my life in Philadelphia, and every summer we have these block parties. And what's happened at block parties becomes pretty annoying in that more often than not, they'll shut down entire city blocks that are one-way streets during certain days throughout the summer when the city is really congested and you have to move your cars off of those blocks. So the streets are activated and there's all types of pedestrian activity and music and things like that. And while more often than not, I guess it's supposed to be fun for like the younger population, for the adults that live there, it was a nuisance because we had to get up, move our cars, find other places for our cars to go, where more often than not there wasn't any. And then if you were actually driving around the city and you encounter a block party, it's like, all right, so how do I get from point A to point B? Because there's multiple block parties going on. All these streets are closed off. That was my immediate thought when I just saw like the block becoming more pedestrian activated, but I can understand the economic development that's attached to it and why something like that would be beneficial.
Yeah, a couple of other points there, which are strictly urban as opposed to applying to your situation. Again, the situation in Philadelphia, I can't really exactly speak to, but in Tuskegee, you might have the exact opposite considerations. For example, New York City is known for people, even though it's congested with cars and there's parking issues and everybody's complaining, you rarely run into somebody who actually drives their car in New York City.
Yes.
It's most people in the city just basically walk to the subway or a bus and then take public transportation, because driving your car is already such a nuisance.
Right.
That last thing you want to do is, once you got a parking space, is move it. That being the case, we're really focusing on pedestrian friendly activities. and neighborhoods where they're actually, I don't know if we kept the statistics in here, but we did a lot of research that didn't end up in the
Final
in this
presentation.
page. Yeah, we didn't want to have too many words here. I wanted big, bright colors and images, but I do know that the neighborhood we chose, people, the car ownership is super low.
Okay.
The cars that you're seeing are people driving through the neighborhood, not stopping and getting out and spending money in the neighborhood. That's that whole part of this whole part of the Bronx is just people driving through it, which is part of the exercise of bridging the community. We wanted people to get out of their car and to make them actually say, you know what, I don't like driving through there anymore. If they're going to drive through there, they're going to get out of their car and, become a part of the community or part of the economy, as opposed to just trucking right through it.
Got you. Thank you. This was very thought-provoking.
Oh, I have a question. I'm sorry, I'm not on the Zoom. I'm in my teacher's office. But it's about the one box solution.
Yep.
So because it's like changing, like who are these like being rented? Are they owned or are they changed seasonally? Like how do they work?
So we thought about, I don't know if we got as far to say exactly. So I'm going to just kind of hypothesize. I don't know what the word is, but we were thinking that these would be city owned, and that the city would then lease them or just give them away to people, to community groups, and the community groups would be responsible for the care of them, and they'd be given instructions, about how to turn them from one thing, how to unfold them and move them, change them from one form to another, and then they're on their own.
Okay.
And so when the one box situations need to be moved or transported, then what happens? Like for instance, during the winter months when it snows and there's lots of snow on the ground and people aren't necessarily outside activating the block, what do we do with the one box solutions? Do we put them in a storage situation and just bring them out during the spring and summer months when it's, easier to maintain plowing the streets and things of that nature? Like what?
Well, believe it or not, our document doesn't show this, but what we were trying to show, what we're trying to do, we didn't show it. We had a short period of time. The idea here was we were thinking, like, can we show a winter scene? Can we take the leaves off the trees, put some snow out here? One of the drivers behind this was that restaurants had to close during the winter, during the pandemic. And so they were allowed to be open, but only for outdoor seating. So we wanted to come up with some way of keeping the restaurant open during the winter, with a structure that you could take the top off, maybe have sides, but put heat lamps inside. So we were actually thinking that most of these would want to stay, but just change their function during the winter. So these are intended to be insulated boxcars, refrigerated, insulated shipping containers.
Got it. That's cool. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions?
Yes, I have one question. My name is Lawrence Thompson, of course, third year architecture major in Professor Asamoah's class. But I had a question about your street typology. I like that slide. I noticed that you said that you wanted to make street life, I guess, vehicle traffic more uncomfortable so that you would be more engaging with the actual community itself. I didn't know, well, technically you kind of answered my question with that statement, but I was wondering, because I see that you have the bike lanes in the center of the roadway instead of on the far right side. So I was wondering is there a safety concern in which having the bikers on the center of the road when it comes to like making right turns or left turns into traffic?
Probably yes, but that's something we'd have to work out with the signals. When you get to, let's say, the end of this street, in plan, I can think here, this axon, I can see it. This is an a street that would be unchanged here. So this traffic lights, we'd have to have an arrow like they do in, I know in Europe they have them for bicycles only. So nobody else is making that left turn, or nobody's turning onto that street, but nobody's making the turn here while the bicyclist is trying to get there. So yeah, they have red and green lights just for the bicycles, and everybody else just has to wait. So it's truly bike friendly.
I've never seen a design with the bicycle lane in the center. I like that design actually. Okay, that's nice. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any more? Yeah. And I was wondering about the patterning on the streets. Was that a deliberate choice in terms of like the color choices? Like that, was that supposed to be representative of something or just colorful?
Wow, that echoed. I don't know for you, but for that, it really, my laughter just echoed. So no, you're talking, that's the slide you're talking about here? You're on mute.
My bad. So yes, that one and the ones that had the kind of view going down the street with the patterns. Yeah, I just wondered if it was purposeful because that's like a big thing in my life. So
no, I mean, the intent was we drew a pattern on there, but we were really thinking that this would be community artists who could basically take over the street. I forgot to mention that earlier, but that's an important part of it. You may not get this, it might just be the bike path and the art, and then figure out. So it's really community driven. So these patterns are indicative of something that the community would create themselves. So this is just, and could be a mural, could be lots of artists getting together, or different ones as it goes down the street. I think that would be pretty cool, actually.
I think it's dope. Do we have any more questions? I do. Do anybody else have any questions? So students, for, your professor's a little bit scatterbrained. So for my own benefit and hopefully for yours. So if we were kind of like to break this down into an equation, right? There was the overall analysis of the city itself, focusing on 3 different areas in terms of equity, right? And then we narrowed it down to a particular borough, and then narrowed it down to, we called out some things that we noticed were inequitable as it pertained to race, economy, and health, right?
Yep.
Did I get that right? Somewhere in there, somewhere along those lines. And then we focused in on a particular area because we wanted to create a solution for a particular neighborhood that we didn't necessarily have a lot of information about. And then once we got into that neighborhood, we said, all right, now what can we do to boost the economy, like solve some of the problems that we found during our analysis. There was some research, of course, some precedent studies, if you will, and then a number of different solutions were proposed, I imagine. And then it was decided upon that there would be these community engaged open streets with community developed artwork and these very versatile shipping container boxes that, along with the changes that were made to the streetscape, would help activate the economy in the area and solve some of the different issues that we're having. So it's like that educational issue, access to healthcare, a space for businesses to still operate outdoors during the winter months with COVID restrictions, those types of things. So just kind of like, as you're taking down your notes, I have a gazillion sticky notes that are in no particular order. Just kind of keep in mind the sequence of the process that was going through to get to this point. Thank you, Doug.
That was quite a good summary. You're welcome.
I hope so, because I say words that don't always make sense. Okay.
Okay. I guess I've got the next presentation. So I actually have two. So Karishma sent one of the larger Baltimore projects. I sent along the technical assistance panel for Park Heights. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for that one. If I remember how to do this. Okay, can y'all see? Okay, so this was something, now both of the projects I'm going to share are over 10 years old, 2009. So ULI is the Urban Land Institute for those that don't know about it. So very much focused in urban design, urban planning. They do things globally, but then also at the national and local level. So this was actually a panel that was pulled together by the city of Baltimore, looking at a particular location in northern Baltimore called Park Heights. Predominantly, you know, used to be historically was like kind of all the dock workers lived here. It's a site of the Pimlico racetrack. And so just kind of a beautiful history, but a very blighted part of town. And so very rundown, similar to some of those areas that Douglas was showing, you know, economic differences, low income housing, poorly educated neighborhood, so on and so forth. So looking at, you know, the town of Park Heights came in and said, hey, we want to develop a master plan, and are you able to help kind of gear us and guide us in a right direction and point out some different areas that we can start looking at and focusing on. So this was kind of a general summary. We pulled together a group of different stakeholders from the community, came in and talked about their different wants and interests and kind of things that are good in the community, things that are bad. They talked with different members that are focused in real estate, some people that are focused in transit-oriented design that work for the city and kind of the transit systems. We had landscape architects, bankers, investors, and so forth. And so they came in and kind of listened to everybody and developed an initial plan for, you know, here's a strategy for what we can do. And so if you've had a chance to flip through this, you know, you can see some of the existing conditions. You know, this is an existing plan of open green spaces, open houses. I think the red were houses that were abandoned or vacant. And then there's a lot of text, so a lot to read through. You know, the landscape architect came in and we talked about this a few times and looked at, you know, this is what's existing, an existing street corridor here, a section through the street. So you can see, similar to that New York example, it's very car focused and it's not very friendly to our pedestrians. And so we looked at, you know, what happens if we do start implementing reducing the lanes, taking one of the lanes for traffic and turning it over to green space and adding trees and creating kind of this center median space. Another option, you know, in some of the more grand boulevard areas, widening the sidewalk areas, creating kind of wind turbines or some sculptural element to help, you know, just beautify the space. Looking at assets and opportunities again, so kind of going through and taking an assessment of what's, you know, what is good, what is already existing, what are some of the challenges that the city and town faces, so on and so forth. And so looking at the plan, you know, kind of doing a small dive into, this is the Main Street, Park Heights Avenue, that they wanted us to focus on. There's kind of this cross section and looking at some existing, like, hey, you know, we've got some green space here. You can see the red that has been drawn in, looking at one of those urban concepts of creating a street edge. And so if you think back to, sorry, going to look at this street. This is the Park Heights Avenue again, and looking at, sorry, here, you know, these houses and buildings that are being torn down and vacated. This is great opportunity for creating and rebuilding that street edge. So coming back in here, looking at, you know, the red corridors there. And then looking at like nodes of activity. So focusing in on different areas of opportunity and zooming in, kind of the team went in and zoomed in on, you know, focus areas and saying, you know, we've got like, there's a green academy, there's a library that's existing here. So how do we create kind of this fun green space that celebrates and these two monumental buildings? How do we create edges around that and kind of work through that street? And I think, you know, just a quick little like axon that somebody drew for that. And generally think that was it for this guy. Some other like concept sketches looking at, you know, just quick development sketches and looking at an initial analysis. So a lot of these sketches were really rough and dirty. This was all done in the course of 2 days. But you know, just wanting to kind of share like, you know, quick general analysis where you can kind of take all of that existing information and just start diagramming out, and then looking at, you know, what's existing, what is, what are great assets, what are your challenges, and what are, you know, opportunities for the future. So that's a brief run through of that project.
Hold on, wait.
Yep.
Is it possible to zoom in on the analysis map on this page?
Page.
I just wanted, if you could, kind of identify some important points on this analysis map and how you came about determining where things should be. Like I was looking at another one of the presentations, and I guess you're going to go over that, but there were like primary streets, which I understood, and then it was like secondary streets. So I was trying to figure out, how do we determine what the secondary streets are as they relate to the primary streets? So could you kind of go over some of those elements?
Yeah, so primary streets, I think you would start looking for patterns of, and you know, Gensler team, if you want to chime in general, because it's not specific to Park Heights or any city in particular. You know, your primary streets are going to be the ones that have the highest, you know, activity. They're usually some of your wider boulevards. So you're starting to see like, you know, maybe it's the 2 to 3 lane roads. Your secondary streets are probably some of those like single lane streets with parking on one side. Maybe they're one way. You know, primary streets would be more of like your main thoroughfare. How do you get through a space quickly? You know, and I think a lot of your business and commercial buildings and uses are located along your primary streets, and then your secondary streets are more residential focused.
Do you mind if I
Yep,
there's
go for it.
no, there was nothing wrong with your answer, so I feel, well, I'll just, primary streets tend to be state streets or county streets. So there's kind of a jurisdiction in terms of you know, they have more lanes, of course, but then more requirements in terms of how you access them, where the curb cuts can be, how far from the, you know, corner your driveways can be, things like that. And then secondary streets are town streets. So you do have those in Tuskegee. You know, the streets that have route names are controlled by the state, probably, at least by the county.
Okay, so here's a question, and this is, I'd asked this of another professor, and he was basically like, use the International Building Code standards, which wasn't helpful. So from what I've come to learn is Tuskegee does not have a designated building code for the city. And I was trying to determine how to go about letting the students know, okay, you can do certain things with these particular streets, like you can widen the sidewalks along these particular areas and raise the curb or something of that nature, and you don't do these things with other streets. Where would we typically go to find that type of information, if not the IBC?
The county probably has a website that will
Shaking
tell
my
you.
head no.
Okay. Well, if it's not county, then you just keep going. Somebody, there's probably two jurisdictions who control the roads, and you can probably walk around and tell the difference between the two just by the way they've been maintained. At the largest level would be state level. The highway is probably a federal road, right? But as you get closer to town, there's a connector. I can't remember the name of it, but it's possible that the roads we're talking about are state roads.
Okay.
So I would start at the state and then keep working my way down until you run out of websites.
Yeah, the websites are very sparse. But
for
continue.
For New York State, it's New York State Department of Transportation. I think that controls the road requirements. Sorry, Jennifer, I'll let you go. Keep going.
I don't think I had a good answer to that either. My initial thought would be potentially the jurisdictions like zoning requirements.
Yeah, I'm finding that in areas that are surrounded by more rural populations, these things are a little more lax. I might need to tap into some Montgomery, because that's the closest major city to us, stipulations, and see how that works. I do know a landscape architect there, and she works for the city, coincidentally, so I'll reach out to her.
But I think for what you all are trying to do in just kind of general visioning, I wouldn't get caught up in some of the code requirements, legalese type things, and just kind of push to create and to envision. Certainly do the research, keep it in the back of your minds, but don't let it limit you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to be quiet now because I want to hear more about this map. Like, for instance, we have healthy urban corners at street level. What does that mean?
So I think, and again, this is several years. So I think these were just kind of goals that everybody wanted to start implementing. So thinking about, urban corners, when you come to an intersection, what did you see? And I think one of the biggest complaints that a lot of the community members were talking about is like, when you pull up to this corner, the streets are like the buildings are dead. It's dark. It's it doesn't feel safe to stand on the street corner in the middle of the night, trying to walk home from, restaurant, from the metro station, so on and so forth. And so how do you activate those corners and make them lively? And so that kind of the healthy urban corner, it was just a concept there of like, let's reinforce that corner. Let's bring in, commercial activity that would help liven those corners and activate them. And so it became like a healthy, safe space to be.
Yeah, I see that Lawrence has a question.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Thompson, you got your hand raised?
Oh, I don't know how my hand was raised. I did not know that was up there. I'm sorry.
No worries.
My apologies.
Did anyone else have any questions?
I have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Scott.
So, when I was going through the article,
Mm-hmm.
it said that you all went through community challenges. And you also talked about community divisiveness. So how do you create pockets and nodes on your master plan to convert diversion into community engagement?
That's a great question. I think it's creating moments for opportunity for interaction. I want to say a lot of the divisiveness and division was economic class, and then a little bit of gentrification. And so the community is feeling like, you know, there's all of these kind of rich developers coming in, and there's new folk coming in and taking up our, you know, their homes and their places of work. And so a lot of that actually had to do with the city itself and ensuring that, you know, percentages of housing were maintained and kept for the existing residents and community, ensuring that commercial buildings and commercial uh, businesses were coming in and supporting, you know, the local existing residents there. So that it wasn't kind of this influx of new affluent, you know, people coming in and taking over existing spaces. So that was a lot more like city governance founded and less in the design and the master plan, but that's something that like was discussed. And then I guess you can also, you know, thinking about like green spaces and, you know, I think even like the healthier urban corners, you know, areas of opportunity where you can have people interacting with each other. You know, I think when you consider a lot of division and kind of, you know, divisiveness between groups, it's just a lack of understanding. And if you actually sat down and talked with somebody, you recognize like, you know, you have more in common with the person, you know, across the table from you. And so wanting to create opportunities for that. And how do you, you know, the question became, how do you create those areas of opportunities? And I think if a master planner was coming in and looking at this, doing a deep dive more than just, you know, a day or two, they'd start, you know, developing, you know, concepts and ideas for that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So to piggyback off of what Mr. Scott asked, I think our situation is opposite in that the city and the community, they're welcoming to a certain type of gentrification in the community.
Mhm.
And we were in one of the town hall type meetings and Rakia asked, you know, would there be any opposition from the neighborhood who were like permanent residents in the community to Tuskegee students coming in and kind of gentrifying the area? And they were saying, no, you know, they welcome those opportunities. So our challenge, I think, is what type of moments do we create to invite alumni and Tuskegee students to come back and quote unquote gentrify the neighborhood in a way that is honoring the history.
Yeah. Was somebody else going to talk? Maybe it was an echo in my microphone. So I think doing an analysis of some of the existing amenities that you have, and then kind of assessing, you know, not just like what is existing, but what is it that is ideal that people would be looking for. So what are some of those building typologies, uses of buildings and spaces that would draw people in? So thinking about, you know, different age groups, you know, what are things that, you know, everybody, what is common to all of the age groups? What is specific to, you know, your young college students? What's specific to the, you know, recent graduates? What's specific to young professionals? And creating building typologies and spaces and kind of uses and functions that overlap. And bringing those in and kind of planning for those spaces.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions in regards to this particular presentation?
Nothing else? Okay. Gensler crew, how do we feel? Do we want to go with one more or just open it up to the students?
Let's see the progression over the last 2 weeks personally.
Yeah.
Unless the students would like to hear more.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have a hard stop at 4:30. But seeing more from the students. We can always present the last one next week when Karishma is back.
Mhm.
But I think this is a nice, very different presentation than the one that I had shown. So it gives a kind of a good range, I think.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
What do you want to do, Professor? Do you think the students should, we'd love to see the students work, but do you want to see more of, our work, and like, what do you want to do next?
So there was a third presentation that
Mhm.
was based in the city of Baltimore that we were kind of going over in depth. And
That would be the one. What Grace
Of
was
course.
talking.
But we can all pitch in. I think we've all watched her presentation. All three of us could, I don't know if Gerard is on the phone, but 3 or 4 of us could share the load and just kind of pitch in on that. Or we could all, as a group, present it together. Since you guys have done the analysis, why don't we do that?
Let me, I'm going to stop share and I'll pull that file up and we can go through it.
I don't know,
That
students, did y'all, because I'm kind of, I'm flexible, and also realizing I feel like there's a lot more analyzing of the site that we need to do. And also, because this is a university project, we have to go through certain permissions to pull actual students on campus. So we're trying to do that correctly in the department because we wanted to poll like the university as a whole, like send out a mass email and get some feedback in terms of things that one would offer to the student population to create those moments that would be beneficial to them rather than us just making suggestions, and get some kind of confirmation on that. So that's taking a bit of time. Also, what else were we looking at? The students had some various ideas about kind of activating certain areas. Hold on, let me see if I can pull it up. Just got really, really hot in my office. A million tabs up. Please be patient with me. So along with kind of working through the different graphics that were necessary for a final presentation, we've been having these discussions about different spaces along the corridor that were either vacant or dilapidated properties, and where we could possibly, or how we could possibly activate those different things based on the feedback that we've gotten from the community organizations. So the students are working on kind of the individual graphics for all of that. And then we just been having some discussions about what should go where and what, you know, justified an activated node or activated area. What would we designate green space? What would we designate historical space, which we still haven't gotten a full succinct idea of where all the historical properties are. That's why I really wanted to look a little more closely at the third proposal, simply because it kind of very much in detail went through these different types of districts in terms of green space, historical space, economic development, and just wanted to know more about that thought process. I'm not sure if this is helpful to the students, but I thought in terms of like analysis, that was some of the stuff we needed to dig deeper into. So we were like talking about anchor institutions this week and what that could possibly be in Tuskegee. So we're just trying to kind of draw some parallels between that study and Tuskegee and see what would come of that. I don't know if that was helpful. I know the students had some ideas that they presented earlier this week. I don't know, Trent, if you wanted to pull up your stuff, or anybody else had some feedback that they wanted to give about how they were looking at recreating the individual sites.
Yeah, I'd actually love to hear, you know, there's lots of colors and overlaps and kind of some words here and there. I'd love to hear what some of the thought process is and some of the analysis.
I can go ahead.
Do you want me to stop sharing, or did you want to explain this, Trent?
Oh yeah, I can share my screen.
You want to share screen?
Yeah, now my computer's moving really slow, but I can go ahead and talk about some ideas that we had. So one idea that I came about was, it was kind of similar to what Mr. Ali Good was talking about with the shipping container homes, but I just had an idea of renovating like certain homes or certain dilapidated structures to benefit the area. And I have a Revit file of it. It's just my Revit is moving really slow. So I would ask another question, like when it comes to big projects like this, how do you all in Gensler compose a big site, a bunch of buildings? How do you compose all of that together without Revit moving really slow or SketchUp moving slow? Like, is there ways that you can work around that? And that's a real question, because I'm having issues right now.
Sorry, Trent, do you have every building in one model right now, or do you have different models that are just linked into one Revit model, if that makes sense?
So we're working on Revit and on SketchUp to bring in the buildings.
Okay.
It gets really slow once you bring in everything.
Right. So do you have the different components set to work sets where you can turn them off and on?
Set to work sets?
In Revit, where when you bring or link a model in, you can put it on a certain work set that can be turned, you can toggle it off and on. And then that'll make your model go faster. However, when you toggle it back on, you know, if you have 2 or 3 that are linked in, including SketchUp, once you turn it on, it goes a little slow, but we're working on a big project here right now. And within our Revit model, we probably have 4 or 5 other models that are linked in, but we have them all set to a work set that we can turn off and on as needed. So I would recommend that to see if that helps speed up things for you.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen because I've actually, if it's okay with Professor Asama, I've actually never heard of work sets.
Sure, because I have no idea about work sets.
It's-
problem.
All right, so if you go to collaborate at the top up there.
I can't see the
Oh,
top.
you were close. You were close. So back at the top list up there where you do your pull downs. So go all the way back up where you have file. I mean, I can't see some of the icons on top, but you see how it's set to architecture right now at the top where you place walls, doors, and windows. Go
I just
across
can't-
that.
I can't see because the zoom is in the way. Like I don't know how to move.
Oh, gotcha. Well, there is, just keep going to the left. Now go up.
Yeah,
then
next to
over.
maxing Insight.
Yeah, you see collaborate right there. Go back to the right.
I can't click on it. I don't know how
Oh, gotcha. Well, under collaborate, you'll see your work sets. And then you're able to create a new work set, if you will. You may just have to Google it.
There it is.
Yeah, there it is. Okay, now go back to the left. Keep right there. One over. Sorry. Say cancel. Go right next to collaborate, which you just clicked. There's the button that says work sets. Right there.
Yes.
There you go. So you would essentially, if you just keep drawing and linking, everything's going to work set number 1. So what you would do is go and set up a new work set, and then you can put different models and anything that you have linked in on a different work set, and then you're able to toggle and turn them off and on. So I wish I just closed my Revit model. I can probably operate mine faster. Let me open it up.
So it's almost like working with layers.
Yeah,
essentially.
essentially.
And you could turn the layers on and off.
Correct.
Got it.
Yep, correct. And so every time you go to set up or to open your model, it'll ask you at that time which work sets you want to start with, so that your model will open faster. If you don't open everything you don't need at the time, but as you need them, you can turn them off and on. That would be, that would be my recommendation. And I can't see the screen down there, but under this little bar here, there's another way to set up a new work set at the bottom, but I just can't see it on the screen. So I'll just open mine and see how quickly I can get to it.
And while Gail's doing that, I think looking at this model, there's a lot of kind of detailed items in there. So I think Gerard had mentioned using just massing, rather than, especially when you're doing like a large urban plan, you can just kind of do like quick, extruded blocks, rather than trying to go in and model walls and, doors and windows and such. You can just kind of do a quick, extruded mass, and that should help lighten up the file as well, because Revit's not trying to like create all those different pieces and parts.
That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
So we had the masses. It's just we had to do like our own separate building.
Mm-hmm.
So like this was my ideal building, but we also had masses as well.
Yeah.
So
mine is still opening. Again, it's to your point, it's got a lot of stuff in it. So it takes a minute to just get everything ready in case we are wanting to collaborate and have every work set on. So I'll share my screen as soon as it gets loaded and just show you an example. So
Gerard,
what building is that you were showing though, Trent?
that was my black box idea. Like I said, it was kind of similar to what Mr. Ali Good was showing with the shipping container homes. Mm-hmm. And it was actually, I can just put it up here. It's just crazy. So this is not what it looks like right now, of course, but this was like an idea of a gym space correlating with a like dance studio and yoga space, so it can all correlate together. But initially, this was an existing dilapidated home, and this was a vacant building that I literally took the same building footprint and built up from there. And along with this small building as well, this is also next to the dilapidated house. So that was the idea. But now I don't know how to stop sharing my screen because I hid the icons.
Trent, are you able to show a picture of the existing structure as it is currently? So we have a reference.
Can you still see my screen?
Uh-huh. And I have my model open, so whenever you finish with that, I can share.
Okay. So this is what it looks like.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to move my screen, but it's not moving.
So one of the things I was thinking about, Trent, as you're developing these black boxes, is there a way to make them, how can I put this? Not something that's more uniform, but like, you know how you'll do a renovation and perhaps there's like a prefab element that you can insert in a building to that can be replicated along the corridor, so that essentially it would be a black box, but with different functions along the strip, depending on what was needed for that thing, but it was some type of module. So when Doug showed the thing with the shipping containers, I was like, oh, that's really dope. But the idea of not tearing down the structures also came to mind. So I wasn't sure if that was something feasible or if we could figure that out. Yeah.
So I think I heard maybe two questions in there. One being like creating kind of a common language, almost like a design criteria, and looking at like maybe different styles. And I think when you start looking at, so my background and specialty is retail, right? So think about, going into a mall or like an outdoor shopping center, there are common factors that are tied between like all the different spaces. So there's, certain height restrictions, there's, material restrictions, you know, kind of spacing. There's a regular spacing and patterning as you move like through, from store to store, that start speaking to kind of this common, every, Nike, Adidas, Microsoft, H&M, they all have their own language, but there's still shared common elements that are common to like the overarching mall, right? And so having kind of, a design criteria or design language for the community, maybe that's something you can start, assessing what is existing. So, there's a lot of homes. What are the different styles of homes that you see? Is it predominantly, cottage style? Is it predominantly, bungalows? Is it, what are the materials that are being used? Are they bricks? Is it painted brick? Is it wood? Is there a lot of glass and metal? And start kind of coming up with common themes and threads. And I think that can help you kind of develop new criteria for any new development that you would be proposing, and for renovating existing structures. And then I think your second question was like, how do you, when you asked about like tearing down a structure, did you mean an existing structure or one of the like box container boxes?
So we were talking about how, if this is a non-historical building, how essentially do we deem it worthy? Do we keep it? Do we tear it down, demolish it, and build something new there? Like, I guess
Sorry,
it's to
I
determine
couldn't walk.
what properties are more significant than others to determine whether or not we're going to keep them, whether it
I
be
also
more
think,
advantageous to get rid of them or just start new.
right. That's what I was
Right.
going to say. Like if the
Yeah.
infrastructure and the guts are not in a good spot, or you're finding that it's going to be more, you know, financially beneficial, you know, to just tear them down. I think that that needs to be assessed, right? You know, if you're able to work with the structure and just do, you know, selective demolition, if you will, where you keep the bones of it, but then, you know, rebuild around it somehow or repurpose, you know, I think that's just an assessment that needs to be made case by case.
And then I think, you know, I know Tuskegee is on the National Register. I know that there are a couple buildings within, you know, the Greenwood community that are on the National Register. So, you know, if you want to start looking at like what deems a space historic, like the National Register gives you kind of 5 different criteria for how you can classify a building as historic. And so, you know, like Trent, kind of those 3 buildings that you shared, maybe that center little shed, does that contribute to the historic nature of either of those buildings? Probably not. Like, you know, if it's, as Gail's saying, you know, kind of it's just a shell and everything else is falling apart, I think that makes for a great, you know, you can make a compelling argument to demolish that building and put something new in its place. You know, but if that were like a barn where, you know, somebody really famous like invented, you know, some cool invention, you know, despite the fact that it's falling apart, that would be something that you might want to look at. Like, you know, we can, Amber Alert, sorry. You know, that would be an argument for keeping the building and revitalizing it and rehabbing it.
Right.
Okay, I'm sorry. Jen, I have like one question.
Mhm.
So you said like about the design criteria. I'm sorry, it sounds like I'm outside because I am outside. I'm actually at my site.
No
And
worries.
I'm gonna just turn on my camera
Yep.
and I'm gonna flip it so you can see. Okay, this is my site.
Mhm.
I don't know if you can see because of the glare, but the green building, the contraband,
Mhm.
contrabrad, whatever, it is the only building like this in Tuskegee.
Mhm.
And I don't know what kind of material this is. Actually, I'm gonna go across the street real quick. Oh no, I'm not. Cars are
Be
coming.
careful.
Be careful.
I don't see a crosswalk.
You literally just left my office. I'm like, where's your kid going? Now
And
I
there's a
know.
car.
Yeah.
Wow.
So my site, well, a part of this was apartments, but it looks like it like just went down. My classmates went in here. I don't kind of want to go in here, but yeah, it's apartments.
Yeah.
But these other 2 buildings, which are 2 different styles, I don't know. Like, I guess I would have to do some research on the time frames, but like when you're saying like choosing a material, like
Mhm.
how would I go about choosing from 3 different styles?
Yeah, I think, you know, leaving the existing material is fine. You know, I think it's just as you maybe as a class looking at the entire community can start to develop a language of different materials that are existing. You know, and it could be just that the case is that, you know, we've got a hodgepodge of different materials and you know, you can use any brick, wood, stucco, metal, whatever. That actually looks like it's stucco that is just placed on top of brick probably or on top of CMU. But when you start talking about a design language, so if you actually carefully go back across the street and
Definitely
look
about
at,
to go back across the street.
if we look
Back
at
to
the
my car.
elevation, yep.
Hold on, let me get a car. Okay, there we go.
Okay, so you've got kind of an existing 2-story building, two 2-story buildings, and then one single 1-story building, right? If
Right.
you drew a horizontal line across like the tops of all doorways, there's kind of like one side. If you look at like where the windowsills start, is there any alignment there? Or is there an alignment at like the roof planes? you can start kind of creating like zones. So like maybe the first floor activated retail space, like what Douglas was talking about, is from 0 to 12 feet. Around 12 feet, 12 to 15 feet. 2-story buildings, maybe your first floor is in that 12 to 15 foot range. And then the next floor, is again, the 10 to 12 foot range. So you're looking at 2-story buildings are, in that kind of like 20 to 30 foot range. So that's what I was talking about as far as kind of like design criteria. And you can even look like, the width of the 2 buildings on the right are pretty similar. And then the green building looks like it's kind of equal to 2 of the tall brick buildings, right? So there's kind of a pattern. It's like 1, 1, 2. Can that be, can that pattern be flipped and repeated, as you move on either side of those existing buildings?
Okay.
Is this the same building where Lionel Richie's house is next door?
No.
No,
So I'm
that's
on
a different-
Franklin Road,
Okay,
and Lonnie Rich's house is on Montgomery.
okay. I don't
Okay,
know why
thank
that
you.
looks familiar.
But this is adjacent to the back entrance to campus. And so one of the things I was wondering about in that, the third presentation, there were, God, why can't I ever remember the names for these things? There was a certain term that you gave to certain entry points into that particular district. How do we judge the importance of entry points coming into the actual district and then entry points from the campus into Greenwood, like proper? Because while the campus is in Greenwood, like there are a number of different entrances and exits into the campus. So how do we kind of focus those activity nodes on entrances and exits from the campus itself? I think this is the map.
This is the presentation. So
Right.
kind of point me where you were talking. So again, this was one that Krishma had worked on. So
Okay, if you go to slide number 30.
Okay.
So you see where it says the primary gateways. So if we were to kind of distinguish primary gateways into the Greenwood district, right? And then also maybe secondary gateways. I don't know if that's a term, maybe I'm making it a term, from the campus into the actual Greenwood district as the city. How will we go about kind of determining those important points or intersections? Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Gail, do you have thoughts?
No, go ahead. I'm not familiar with this. I didn't hear Krishna's presentation.
Yeah, she quickly flipped through this, so I'm only vaguely aware because I worked in Baltimore for like a year. So I would say it's really based on your analysis, right? So kind of recognizing, major nodes. I think you guys already identified one of the primary gateways, which is right where the Felders is, right? You all talked about this is the first thing, that you see when you come off the main, was it Franklin Road? Before turning into campus. So I think it's like, what is kind of existing? What are those main kind of like hubs? I think it's, there's different ways of recognizing gateways. So, here, I think this is like, the intersection of 2 fairly major streets at the beginning of like this office development. So it makes sense coming off of the major street, this is kind of your entry node. And kind of gateway. Similar over here, it looks like this is like an intersection of, the Center West district, and looks like there's a green space. So, what is that corner node there?
I think also what's going to be important, I'm talking to the class now, as we're analyzing these different nodes, is the timeline. So because we are a college town, there are certain times of year where obviously there's a lot more activity on campus than other times of year. During the summer, maybe not so much. But during the fall and spring, when there are active classes going on, typically, you know, there would be heavy traffic. Like I didn't realize Franklin Road was so active during this time of day because I'm in my office. But those are the things that we can kind of point out and say, okay, during the spring semester, fall semester, maybe during homecoming time, there's more activity going on in these certain nodes. During, what is it? We have Greek weeks going on right now. SGA week, these are certain activity nodes that are really active, and how do we kind of play to the strengths of all the activities that are going on adjacent to campus to bring some of that energy into the town during those times. I hope that made sense. That was very long-winded. But I think it's important for us to kind of phase it out in terms of an actual timeline and when different parts of the campus are in use during those times.
Yeah, I think you lost me. I'm sorry. I was I was trying to follow.
So my thought was, okay, so this kind of like identifies different nodes around the campus as it applies to, I guess, the different anchoring institutions. Tuskegee's the main anchoring institution in this area, in the Greenwood community. Outside of that will probably be the VA hospital, but the majority of the population doesn't really go there. They might just work there. So my thought was, in terms of analyzing activity along these nodes, like identifying the nodes in the community, it would be helpful to do multiple maps like this during different times of the year.
Oh, God, yeah.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying.
Thank you, Gerard.
Thinking about that when you were talking, like maybe the map is based on the nodes or based on like the experience. So it's based on the users and how they would be able to like be a part of the space. Because thinking about like a college campus, it's a lot of movement, and like you were saying, sometimes they have like homecoming, or they may like have I forgot what they call it when the fraternities have
Tailgating. Oh,
Greek weeks.
yeah, Greek week, things like that. Yeah, so things like that where pledge. So sometimes they pledge in a certain same spot. So like that could be something that's important to the college students. So the nodes could be created at those points. So it provides the users to always walk into a space that could have the attempt of having like a deeper interaction.
So that's what you were referring to when you said secondary, right? Because it's not always constant, but there are going to be times where they're peaking, if you will.
Right. So during those peak times, my question is, how do we create experiences to bring that activity to other parts of the community?
Gotcha. Well, I mean, I personally think there are different, again, I focus mostly on interiors, the inside of the structures and buildings and spaces. But, I just think here in Atlanta, we have many, many, many events happening at any given point in time. And usually when there is an event, you think of the activation of like the streets and the area that is happening, where there could be temporary painting on the streets that kind of guide you and lead you into that zone of where that event may be happening. But then there's also the, if you think about the posts and the different signs that are posted or hung, making it a possibility to change that out, based on what season or event or holiday may be happening at that time. And doing it in a way where it's consistent and clean. And for me, mainly the consistency. You get used to looking at that post and seeing like what's happening this week in this area. What's happening at this park, what's happening in this city or this jurisdiction. So there are different ways to do it. And I just think of that like with Atlanta, when we go to downtown. You always know what's happening downtown.
Mhm.
And it's because of those, you know, the activation of those posts and the signs. And then, like I said, we will even paint the streets as long as it's something that can be, you know, a temporary solution.
Mhm.
I think Jen was gonna share Revit. I
Oh,
know
no,
y'all
that
have
was
to
me.
go soon. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
I know
okay.
y'all have to go soon. I just wanted to like understand what to do.
Right. Okay. Yeah, let me share my screen. And Gerard, don't laugh. He's like, Gail's going to show you Revit, probably.
I didn't say anything. I believe in you.
I know just enough to be dangerous, put it
I'm
that
the
way.
Gail of the group. It's okay, Gail. I understand. My
Okay.
students are more effective than me.
So can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so remember I guided you guys to, and I hate how this comes down, but to collaborate. And here's your work set. But this is what I was saying down here below. I usually just go to this little shortcut here. And when you click it, this is all of the different LinkedIn like models that we have here. And you can see brand signage, which isn't even Revit. So we got all of this. We got the base building architect's model linked in. There's a different architect for, you know, the base building. We have a different architect working on the plaza level of this project, so their model's linked in. We have CD plus M, which is a lighting consultant. So all of their light fixtures are linked in, you know, and it just goes and goes and goes. So when you open Revit and you click collaborate, this screen will pop up and allow you to basically turn off that LinkedIn model, which should, and that should work for, I think you said SketchUp. I'm thinking of Inkscape, but SketchUp for you. And you would just go here to create a new work set. And then you just name it. And then anything you draw, say for instance, if you have a new, I don't know, wall you want to place or whatever, you can put that wall on that work set. I can't find a construction plan at the moment, but and see how nothing shows. It's because I didn't turn the right work sets on. So it's not going to show you anything until you turn on those work sets. So you would go to whatever work sets you're trying to look at that time, turn them on. And then from that point, you'll see here, they'll just start to show up. It takes a second depending on how large each of those are. So basically, I would say start there and just see if that helps. And then, you know, use the tip that Jen offered as well.
I'm copying a link into the chat
Okay.
from Autodesk that walks you through how to set up a
Oh,
work set.
awesome. There you go.
Thank you both. That was extremely helpful. All of this has been extremely helpful, like going through the different master plans and kind of picking out the information because, like I said, this is not my specialty. This is just something I took on because the community asked, and we had the opportunity to tap into your expertise. So thank you very much.
I have a quick question on that.
Yes.
Is this group the only group focused on this effort, or are you also working with the other students, meaning your fourth year, fifth year students?
So initially, the fourth and fifth year students, I'll say specifically the fifth year students were engaged. However, they have shifted. They were engaged in the charretting process. And basically, if I were to call them in to ask them for assistance in something, then they would definitely help. But their focus right now is thesis. So they all have their individual thesis projects. There's one student in fourth year who I know is interested in the project. However, he hasn't started working on thesis yet, but he's been assisting the students with different elements of this project. So in terms of like modeling and things of this nature, but with the examples of the master plan were extremely helpful because then I could like group some of the information to different things like, okay, we're going to make districts, we're going to phase this stuff out, we're going to, you know, give them some steps to kind of go by. So that was
right.
Yes. So yes, to answer your question, we are primarily the only group working on this project currently.
Gotcha. Okay. Well,
This
just to
may
show
be
you
an
this really
ongoing
quick,
thing.
I was just gonna try and show you guys this really quickly, and then I do need to jump, but you can see here it finally opened. And once you select an item, you just come over to your browser, your properties browser, and you can pick what work set to place that item on. Does that help? I think it was Trent that asked the question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that helps. The only concern I'm having is, does it work for like the student versions as well? Because I know y'all have like the
I would think so. I would think so because just to, I laugh when, I'm jokingly saying Gerard is probably laughing at me. I've been working for a number of years. So but I stay in Revit, like I say, enough to be dangerous, but more of our junior staff, they're the ones that are teaching me how to use these different things. And, when there's something new that pops up and they learn it in school. So I would hope that the version you're using would have the similar tools, if not all.
Yeah, I think it's the same.
It should be the same. I
Yeah.
think the only thing that the student version does is when you print a PDF, it puts a watermark on it and says this was the student version. So
Yeah, I think it's the same.
yeah.
Other than that PDF comment.
So I think the main issue that I'm having right now, like I know how to do the masses. I kind of get it away from that, but I do know how to like construct the masses and everything like that. I'm just having trouble bringing that building that y'all saw to the actual site. Like it's sitting up under the site and I don't know how to bring it up to the topography.
So that's probably a hosting issue. And so like your ground floor level, you need to locate within like whatever level that topography line is. So where your bottom like topo line is. Or like you need to bring the site down to align with the same, like your level 0, your ground floor.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
I haven't tried bringing the site down. I've just been trying to bring the buildings up. I'm going to try that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yep.
I do have to run, but thank you guys, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
This was
Bye.
helpful.
Bye-bye.
Did any of the other students want to show their progress in terms of ideas for their sites or yes, no questions maybe? I have to run to the restroom. So please ask questions. I'll be right back.
So anyone have questions or want to share?
If not, I can share my screen, Jen, so you can kind of walk me through what I'm doing.
And I might need Gerard's help here because I haven't worked with site topo
Yeah, I'm
stuff in a
still
while.
on. I was gonna say to see if you can do what Jen said first and try and just bring the building up.
Yeah. So I guess I question like what height is your lowest topo line, and then or like it looks like you've built there's a pad.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I
Like
did
what
building
level
pad.
what level is that hosted to? So if you click on that.
It's
Looks to
on
be
level 1, but I
level
did
1.
a height
You did
offset.
okay.
91.
So you might have to do that with like your entire building if it's hosted to level 1.
Yeah.
Offset everything by 91 feet.
Okay.
You might be able to, if you hide that and then select everything. You might not be able to select everything at once.
Like if you do, maybe select all your walls first, or like pick a wall and see. So yeah, you're at level 1. So take like the base offset on the left and put that at 91 feet.
91, yeah.
And see what that does.
Yeah, it's gonna get rid of your windows. But yeah, I think so. Then everything would be everything would need to just move up 91 feet.
Okay. What about, so
It
I
might
have messes too.
it might be easier to just move your site down, so you're
Yeah.
only moving one thing instead of moving
Yeah.
everything up.
Okay. That I've never done before. So,
It might
so
be
the
as
site is a lot bigger than this. I just did a section box
You
to
did a
kind of speed
box,
up the
yeah.
process.
Is the site shared? Is this a shared model, or did you link the site in to your model?
I linked the site from AutoCAD.
Okay. I would start with let's cut a section, and instead of looking at it in 3D, actually just look at it in section and do it in
Okay.
2D. Yeah. Go to view.
Where would you say
Yep.
I should cut it?
Go up to the top. Oh, you got, yeah. Just kind of anywhere, cut through like maybe that building pad, either north to south or east to west, whichever. Yeah. Just do kind of like over the, yep, whole thing, and then let's go to the view.
Oh,
Yep, and then zooming out a little bit. So see if you can click the model or the topo, and then just move, see your base offset on the far left, do minus 91 feet. Fingers crossed, y'all.
oh, it looks like it's good.
Did it do it?
I thought it did. It looks like it did part of it.
Maybe I didn't click on the right thing.
It might be that all of the contours weren't selected
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah, so what's the
You
other
could
way to
probably
do it?
select the 3D, I mean the
yeah.
topo in 3D, and then
Mhm.
just
And then move
drop
to the
it.
section. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
So pick that. Yep. And then
won't
I
let
wonder
me.
if you can just move it, like use your
See
move
if you can
tool.
move it down. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it looks as if it's two things. So I think the topo lines
Mm-hmm.
is one, and then
The mass itself is
the
different.
mass is another
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Yes, because I did the topo lines in AutoCAD, and then I brought it in and created the site. I mean the topography from that.
So
it
what if
kind of
you,
kept the lines.
if you turned off the topo lines, would that eliminate the roadways that you put on there already, Trent?
No, I did the roadways as a sub-region, so they're there. But I did want to keep the map just in case I have to add more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you can probably maybe go back to the 3D view and select all of it together, and then yeah, there it's going. So then if you use your like the move tool, which is the crosshairs, yeah, that guy. So back in the section, you know, if everything's selected, you can click a point and then drag it down and enter a number. So you can enter your 91 feet. Yeah, and then just select and yep, and then you can enter your distance.
It won't be 91 feet anymore though, because
Yeah,
44.
you've
you're
already
moving it down.
offset. Yep.
That's true.
91 minus 44.
I'm just gonna go all the way back. Yeah, I was having a lot of trouble, but this is helping a lot.
Great. Yep. And then just enter 91. You don't even have to do the minus
Okay.
because you're already like moving in the direction, in the downward direction. Yep.
Okay.
And then hit enter. And that should do it.
Wow.
And
What
you just
about
bring
the
down
depth?
your
Mhm.
So,
3D view.
And then your 3D box, your scope box, you can just change your extents. Mhm.
oh, okay. Yeah, this helped a lot. I just got to move the building pads down, but thank y'all so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
My nerves are gone now.
This is what we've all been doing in the
Yeah, I was
last
about
year,
to
working
say.
from home and sharing screen, and somebody's like, no, not that way, the other way.
It's like 6 different ways to do everything.
Mhm.
Trent, one thing I want to make sure that we do is, so the precedent study that we looked at, I think it was a TED Talk, where the gentleman was going to the different neighborhoods and kind of setting up something similar to the Black Box site. We want to definitely reference that precedent. I think it was in Chicago. So we need to go back and gather that the particular project and all the information that pertains to that. So that was just a note before I forget. We need to make sure we look at that. And if I remember to pull up the TED Talk, I'll send it to you. Did anyone else have any questions in regards to their sites and what different things they were implementing and, feedback on that?
Sustainability of everything.
Say that again.
With my life that I'm working on,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to implement sustainability while using carbon rates.
Okay. Did you want to log in and share screen or?
I'm hoping I have Wi-Fi here. So
oh, did you sign in? I'm sorry, Kayvon's in my office. Did you sign into the Tuskegee Wi-Fi? Thank you, Gerard. I always do the Tuskegee. I think the private one, the password's Golden Tigers or something like that. Did anyone else want to show what they were working on in terms of their individual sites? If you have sketches, if you have models, here comes Kayvon, so he's logging in. Okay. So what I'm gonna need from the class, I'm gonna have to mute myself in a minute because it's echoing. I need a large scale map printed because we've been working digitally and I think that's possibly a hindrance at this point in terms of like looking at the whole greater site. So if we can get a large scale map similar to the one that the model team printed out, we can mark some things up, but I would need that by Monday. So I think the plotter is working now because fifth year was in there the other night plotting things or doing 3D printing or something or the other. They were doing activities in the room where that happens. So I need y'all to get that plotted out for Monday. And if it's not, then you'll need to go to another source and get it done. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy, just a map of the district on bond. Kayvon, you have the floor. I'm going to mute myself now.
Okay, so the space that I'm working on is with the Felders, right over in that vacant lot space over by Felders. What I tried to focus on was making a bike/lounge sort of space in that area. I was trying to really focus more on letting it being a place of maybe just putting bikes to the side or either grabbing your bikes a lot of times, whether you're just coming from class, but also a space off campus to kind of lounge around and sit potentially. I also thought about the times that like Professor Oswald was talking about when it's pretty busy and we have the parade that usually comes during homecoming and things like that. It could also be a very interesting spot to view a lot of the things that are going on as well. I was looking at it as trying to implement some sustainability parts of it. I thought about a solar panel potentially just to allow lighting underneath for times at night, of course, and maybe underneath in the lounge spaces as well, just so it's always lit and allowed to be able to be seen and know that you're there and things like that. So sense of kind of safety or some other parts on the back end right now. I can't really, hold on. There's so much around here. Let me see if I can rotate it. Around on the back end of it, I do have like similar to like a storage space. So I thought that might be a good place to maybe store the battery or store what would light everything up so it's not physically in the way or being active. And right up above is obviously a walking deck. So there's no actual influence anywhere from it being bothered or touched. But if there's any other ideas potentially for what could be used maybe for sustainability, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah. Have you cited this on the site plan yet? Have you located on a site plan, or is the intent that this could pick up and go anywhere?
I actually like the idea of putting it in multiple places, but yeah, he does have a particular site that he's looking at.
Yeah, the plan originally was maybe just like a pick up and go potentially. I knew we were doing something in terms of for right now, but could eventually be moved somewhere else or relocated if possible. So I thought of this as just maybe one if there were other places that maybe my other peers were working on that it could be suited for later on, or maybe a potential to extend further. I thought that would also be pretty neat to use. But yeah, currently right now it's just a vacant lot over by Felters.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, like, if it's cited in one particular location, I think you can start looking at, you know, prevailing wind, solar direction, start thinking about, you know, concepts of can, you know, passive heating and cooling, you know, if you're doing wind turbines usually are a lot easier to kind of in theory install than like photovoltaics, but you can start looking at photovoltaics. I actually, this is making me think of, have any of you taken a look at or participated in the solar decathlon? Have you heard of it?
I've never heard of that.
Okay, so Google it. Department of Energy for the US hosts, I think it's every other year. And this is something, you know, I would love to see you guys maybe this group spearheads it for the future. It's a biannual challenge that universities kind of create like a container house. And it's the buildings are supposed to be like fully net zero. And so it's a national, it's actually now international because Germany has submitted a couple buildings in the past, but kind of looking at like, you know, it's usually a small residence and, you know, using containers and whatnot. And then just different, you know, sustainable practices and kind of implementing it into the building. So one of the ones a couple years ago had like these sliding doors, sliding glass doors, and it had actually the built-in blinds that were made of small photovoltaic cells. and panels. So like the technologies out there, it was pretty kind of, it's like this joint thing between architecture, business, engineering, you know, different programs across the universities. But you know, there's some really cool concepts for small container and sustainable you know, technologies that could be incorporated into your design. And Professor, you're on mute.
Hold on, mute your thing, Kevon. I'm sorry, we're he's sitting across from me.
Oh yeah.
So we actually entered this, and I considered entering this year with another class.
It's a
I feel like all of the sustainability projects
Yeah.
ever just they're like, Professor Asamoah can do it. So this is something that I would like to do. This is something that Tuskegee has entered in previous years. I think we've done it twice, but I have to look further into getting some collaboration from the other departments.
It's a pretty big,
to
it's a big
participate
undertaking.
possibly next year.
Yeah, and it's like, I know the buildings have to be like picked up and transported cross country.
On a
Yeah.
sticky note for my to-do list.
But I think that, you know.
Kayvon, did you want to go ahead and share a screen? And then Mr. Davis, I know you had sent me a model as well. Could you pull up your stuff as well if you're by your computer so that you can get some feedback? Cedric. Kayvon.
Can you hear us, Professor Asamoah?
Yes, Trent.
Oh, I didn't know if you could hear us. I didn't have anything to say. I just threw.
Trent, did you say something?
Yeah, I think Jen was saying something. I didn't know if you could hear us or not, because I know you had that issue before, but I think you can now.
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm just listening to you on Kayvon's computer because I got 3 different devices going on in my office right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so Kayvon, do you want to share, is this where your building's going?
Yes, this is where my building is going here in this space, this vacant lot space right here. Yeah, I'll pull up a view of it.
So Felders is on the left.
Yeah, so in reference to it, Felders would be here on the left. And vacant lot, that's over here.
Gotcha. So I think, you know, there's lots of green space. There's also kind of this existing parking pad, you know, maybe there's elements to look at for the site itself. You know, I don't know how much rain y'all get, but it looks pretty green. So, you know, think about like, where is water runoff? Is there opportunity for bioswales, you know, some retention ponds, you know, maybe the containers have rain catch basins, you know, thinking about looking at like the parking pad and the drive aisles here, you know, is it implementing permeable pavers? You know, you're doing the containers, so there's already some recycled content there, but is there other, you know, are there other materials that could be incorporated into the pods themselves that are, you know, very sustainable? So looking at like the materials that you're proposing for the interior finishes or for the furniture's, you know, pieces themselves.
Right.
I think those are the things that kind of come to mind.
Right. I actually, that's actually not a bad idea about the furniture. I know I've done a project with doing making chairs out of 100% recycled material, so it is doable.
Yeah.
I think that would be a pretty interesting project, you know, if you did with some of our classmates or students and stuff to maybe go in those spaces as well. So I definitely would look into that and maybe pay attention, like you were saying, to the runoff of rain and things like that. There might be an opportunity there. Thank you.
Yeah. And, you know, I think with it being adjacent to Felders and Felders being kind of vacant right now, right? You know, maybe it's a proposal of, you know, maybe bike repair or coffee shop or something that ties in with your containers. So start looking not just at, you know, the blank empty site, but looking adjacent to it, like how can, you know, is there programming that you can assign to those spaces as well?
Right. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I think Tyler's working on that. Sorry, everybody can't hear me. I was saying that Tyler Littles is working on the Felder site, so that would be a good conversation. All of y'all need to talk to each other. It's a big thing about where things are going and how different elements relate to other spaces, because we're all trying to activate the same corridor. So it can't just be, you know, in isolation. I'm designing this particular site. I know it's a little difficult being that we're doing this virtually, but it helps to kind of log on to Zoom and share screen and say, okay, so this is what I'm doing on my site. What are you doing on your site? How do these two things interact with one another as you are working? So if that's a late night in the studio, cool. I know I tend to talk through your studio sessions, but if y'all can say, Ms. Hassanwar, we just need to have a work session and get some feedback from you. That's why I'm always asking for check-ins to see what everybody's doing. So, you know, do the things, collaborate. That's important. Y'all got to do it virtually. That peer-to-peer interaction is essential, especially with this project, because it's a whole neighborhood that we're designing, not just one individual building. Cedric. Kayvon, can you stop sharing screen? And Mr. Davis is going to start sharing screen.
Hey everybody, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right, so how are you doing? I am Cedric Davis. And so basically this is what I've been working on. This is my site model as of right now for this space along Franklin Road. And I'm in the process of switching computers right now, so all of my documentation is not handy, but I am on Google Maps to provide context for everything. Going down too far. All right. All right. So this is my site that I have put into SketchUp and made a model of. And, so initially, I talked to a lady by the name of Mrs. Williams, I believe. She's a resident of Tuskegee, Alabama. And she initially brought this to my attention, and it's just very convenient that we're doing it now in my architecture class. But we just had a slight conversation, and she kind of gave me a rundown of what she initially thought that this could be, and I just really ran with that thought because as of right now, it functions as a small convenience store. And those pumps, this is the convenience store that's on the screen right now with those cars in the front. And then these pumps, these are not active working pumps, but as we all can see, this was once a gas station. So really that's what I did with this model. So I decided to stick with the convenience store thing. But Mrs. Williams initially thought that she wanted to be a full grocery. So when I went to the site, this building is pretty long. I don't remember the measurements right off, but it stops about, I would say this building is about like 40 feet long, I would say, and maybe it stops 30 feet. Maybe when you actually get into the store, there's a cutoff to where the freezers stop, and there's a doorway that leads to another part of the building, and I do not know what's back there right now. But so this is pretty much what I did with the site. I made all of that concrete area you see in the Google map. I just really straightened all that out and made it more of an asphalt. And I view that as like a parking area by chance. I also added sidewalks as well and some green areas. This green space is already there, and it's still there today. That is right here. And then the sidewalk basically made the sidewalk continuous in my model, and I added a small green space in front. So I would love to gain some feedback on how I could improve this model. Because my initial issue is, I think me adding the windows, I thought the building could use more natural sunlight, but I also think that might take away from the historical significance of the building, because the windows I have in front, those are already there, just not in that necessary style, but the windows on the side are not there. But that's currently what I have as far as my side model.
Mhm. So as far as like historic significance, what is the significance of this building?
But maybe I shouldn't have went on to the extent of saying historical significance, but that building has been there as long as the Greenwood community has, to my understanding. So I just feel like in the event that we are revitalizing the Greenwood community, those that return and still live in the community would still like to be able to recognize this building and still like to see it in its state that it's in now. That's just one issue I kind of thought about.
I think, the proposal of adding windows to the sides and kind of cleaning everything up does not take away from kind of the historic, or I guess the recognizability of the building. If you know that that's a convenience mart, it's, and it's now changed to a grocery, or a smaller convenience store or whatnot. I don't think you're losing that in what you're proposing. I actually would, I think this is a great opportunity to Professor Osma's point. Is this something where like maybe the green space on the far left or even part of the front becomes opportunity for some of like those bike storage units? What else can you do other than just putting a parking lot at to adjacent to this building? Is it something, when you talk about urban design and planning, and I think this is in the Baltimore example, it talks about creating an urban edge. So how do you create that urban edge here? Is it by adding buildings? Is it kind of creating green space along your walkways? Planting trees, start considering some of those other site elements. And then also, how do you pull people in off the street? So if you're visiting, maybe it's a student with their parents coming to visit the campus and they're driving around, how do you make this a destination? How do they know, like they're driving by and, ooh, let's go and stop in there? So start thinking kind of like, what are those things that attract people in, that would slow traffic down a little bit, and make this a place where like people want to come, not just to like stop in and out. So I guess with that, like consider different users. I think that's something, you know, we as designers, we're storytellers, right? And so we want to think about the people that are using our spaces. So think about the different types of people that would be coming in and using the store, right? You've got probably the person coming in just grabbing a quick, you know, bag of ice. You've got somebody coming in and wanting to do their groceries for you know, the next week. You've got the group of maybe, I mean, my grocery store always has like, there's a group of older guys that just kind of sit outside. So are you creating spaces for them to do and just like sit and stand and catch up and chat, you know, all day long? Does that make sense? Does that help?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Hold on, mute your mic. Keep on, please. So one of the things that I want us to be very clear about historical significance and old buildings, right? Because historically significant buildings have usually a style tied to them, or some type of person that may have lived there and been in that space for a period of, like Lionel Richie's house. If we were trying to get that on the National Historic Register, there would be some significance tied to that house because of Lionel Richie. The Oaks, there's some significance tied to that house because of Booker T. Washington and who built it, things of that nature. So we want to be very succinct when we're determining whether properties are important in terms of altering them, number one. Two, after we find out whether or not it's really significant, we want to determine, you know, what are some of the needs in this community? And if we're going to put a grocery store here, then why not expand the structure, in my opinion? There's a farmer's market currently in the town, which is why all these context maps that y'all are developing are important. So there's a farmer's market, there's a Piggly Wiggly. Calhoun Foods, which was one of the major grocery stores in the town, was just torn down. That's not in the Greenwood community. There's no major grocery store in the Greenwood community. So if you were going to provide a space where that is important, then perhaps some expansion is to be considered. Another thing, to Gail's or Jen's point, I'm sorry, it's hard for me to determine who's talking sometimes. Another thing to her point is we don't want to necessarily have large paved parking lots without considering like stormwater runoff and sustainability. So we did a whole presentation in class about green stormwater infrastructure and what are some of the different things that could be implemented to mitigate that, and why that's important for this particular area, especially that we have so many sloping sites, and we do get about 45% of rainfall and 45 inches of rainfall yearly on average in Alabama. Another thing that we want to take into consideration is the heat island effect. So if we are like just creating large patches of blacktop without any shade, what type of space does that create? It creates very hot surfaces that people don't want to necessarily engage in. So what type of spaces create engagement? People like to be able to sit outside and enjoy the weather without necessarily being browbeated by that. So we might want to create some shaded spaces. I remember Wednesday, I did a case study in an area in Durham, North Carolina, where they had like super huge gaming pieces. It was like a gigantic chessboard or something like that, where people could sit outside and do activities. So what type of activities would engage people in that particular space if you were to create an outdoor space that was adjacent to this particular structure, if you kept it that size, then what could that be? So I just want you to do some more research and be a little more creative with it. Like, it doesn't have to be just a reconstruction of the existing building with some new windows. Like, it can be more. And I think when we have our discussion on Monday with that map printed out that y'all are going to take care of this weekend, it'll be more inspiring, because we're going to step away from the computer for a little while. Obviously, I'll have to be videotaping myself during that process, but I think stepping away from the computer and allowing your ideas to kind of flow from head to hand and drawing things out first will help you to think a little more creatively. Because right now, I don't want to just see reinventions of the same building that's already there, and that you cleared the parking. I think there's a gas station or something there, like you clear the gas station posts. There is something to say for brownfield remediation, which is what that would be. There's an existing gas station there, so that's important. Pull up the existing site, look at what's there. So if we're doing brownfield remediation and we're designating that as a brownfield site, which you want to look up that term so you fully understand what that is, what does that kind of entail? What does that mean? And what kinds of things can we incorporate on the site to make this site useful? So there's something very special about your site in that there is a former gas station there, and there could possibly a historically significant building there as well. So we want to do some more research around those two elements to determine what is best suited to go there.
Yeah, I think those are
That
all
makes sense,
great.
Cedric?
Yes, ma'am. It does. I just looked at brownfield remediation.
Oh,
Says
Um,
real property, the expansion, redevelopment, or reuse of which may be complicated by the presence or potential presence of a hazardous substance. Okay.
yeah.
And I would also add, I think you said the building was kind of like 30 by 40 feet long, or 30 by probably looks like about 60. I think your parking area is actually extremely oversized. So there's some standards, design standards, and that's actually something I think you can look up in the IBC. I think if we consider this like a retail, it's like for every 1,000 square feet of retail space, you need 3,000 square feet of parking, which is like 10 cars.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so if you choose to look at expanding, like your professor has suggested as an option, then maybe you would need a larger parking area. But if you want to leave this footprint as the same, I would look at that parking area, significantly reduce that, and then look at how you can reprogram the rest of the site.
Yes, ma'am.
And if there's an old gas station there, I remember there was a graduate student when I was in school that looked at kind of repurposing, revitalizing gas stations. And there's some cool things that you could do with repurposing gas stations. So maybe do some precedent studies of that as well.
Cool. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Did anyone else have something that they wanted to bring forward? I know Nala was working on green spaces. Tyler was working with elders. Trying to think. Rakia's not on here right now. Mr. Carlisle, did you have any progress in terms of what you were looking at for Club Masons?
If since I see like Cedric and Kayvon, like their buildings are going up pretty quickly. So when y'all get a chance, when y'all get done, can y'all just drop those in the Google Drive so I can place them on the site? Just when you're finished, because I know y'all want to add some more stuff to it.
Yes,
So
sir.
just when y'all are finished, you can drop it in the let me see, in the digital site team folder.
I heard an okay from Kayvon, just
All
FYI,
right, bro.
Trent. Don't go anywhere. We still got to talk. Anybody else? No? Any questions for our Gensler team?
I just wanted to say thank you for the help. So that was amazing.
Yeah, you're welcome. So actually, I'm dropping our email addresses in the chat here. I need permission from Gail, but she's offline for the rest of the day. But just if y'all have questions or need some Revit help or whatever throughout the week, like go ahead and email us. I'll say I'm guilty of it. I'm not immediately responsive, but I'll try to get to emails, especially from students in the evenings. So, we're here to help. And so, I know the Zoom thing is kind of weird sometimes. So if you want to do, quick, small one-on-ones, or you just want to shoot an email and say like, hey, have a question about this. What are your thoughts? Like, we're here to help. So please feel free.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you.
This was it was helpful for me. I mean, sending the presentations over, I told you, was extremely helpful for me. And so hopefully we will have more progress next week, because after that, we only have 1 week. They kind of need to do a version wrap up of this project by the 26th, because that is our midterm for the semester. And then we'll kind of determine whether or not we're going to move forward, do some more with this project going into the second half of the semester, or cover another area. So
yep.
Stay tuned.
Okay, well, I'm gonna drop off as well. So great to see all of your work and the progress, guys. I know this is a huge kind of overwhelming project, and there's some good progress here. So
thank you, Jen. Have a great weekend.
Have a good weekend. See you all later.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, students. So we understand that Monday, I definitely need a printed full-scale site. I feel like I've been asking for this for a while. So if that means going to Office Depot and spending $15 to get a printed full-scale site, then do those things. And y'all can all cash app each other. That's 8 of y'all, $2 each. We'll cover it. So please, please, please have that printed for Monday and have that in my office by 1 o'clock, so that we can go through the process of doing some overall master planning by hand, and hopefully tie all these different ideas together so that it makes sense for the broader layout of the project, because otherwise we got all these kind of sparse ideas that don't really connect with one another, and we need to develop an overall design language that will unite the community and all of that. Okay. And whatever projects, like individual sites that you're working on, make sure that you pull out a precedent study for that thing that you've developed. 1 or 2, it doesn't have to be, anything too difficult, but you can, briefly analyze that precedent study and talk about how it impacted, give me a little write-up about how it impacted that particular community that it was applied in. Because we're going to be putting together a booklet similar to what we saw, a report similar to what we saw. So we need to be able to say there was some analysis done. We did some research to say, this particular thing worked in this area, which was similar, and I want to do the same thing here because it could work here. You get me? Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you so much for your time. I'm gonna let y'all go. I know we got 10 minutes. I'm not gonna keep talking. Does anybody got any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay, cool in the game. I will see you on Monday.